You'll use something like Bitcoin. I also think that's a very strong idea. And this price chart shows that if this thing starts to appreciate at these rates, it will fully replace gold and become a way to buy and sell hard assets. When you add that to the worry that some people have about the dollar losing value, I think you start to see some really interesting possibilities. I just thought this was a... We'll look at the Bitcoin price for you. I asked him to look at how prices changed 1, 3, 6, 9, 12, and 18 months after cycle. It's being looked at again, and people are trying to understand it first. The first episode of the popular All In podcast this year featured Cycle's wealthy investor Chamath Palihapitiya. He said that 2024 would be the most important year for Bitcoin since it began trading in 2009, and that the ETFs would have a big effect on the biggest cryptocurrency by market cap. Second, Chamath said that desire for ETFs will make Bitcoin more popular. A rich man thought that Bitcoin would be so famous that even baby boomers who were against it would buy it and hold on to it. Chamath said that Bitcoin would be used as a language for money by 2024. ETFs set new highs. Chamath had no idea what would happen. A new study, like the one in the most recent episode of All In, shows that there are over 1 million global ETFs worth over $67 billion and 855,000 Bitcoin ETFs. Chamath stresses ETFs and holding events because he thinks Bitcoin will go through a huge bull run in the coming months. The rich man says that Bitcoin's price stayed the same for 3 to 6 months after the Hing incidents. After 6 months, however, prices start to rise again. He thinks that prices and usage will continue to rise in 2024 and 2025. There are a few good reasons to talk about crypto. One reason is that the cut happened at the end of April. When did that take place? People who don't know, Bitcoins are made by answering very hard mathematical puzzles that cost a lot of time, effort, and money. The halving is where this happens. And when you figure it out, you get some Bitcoin as a prize. That prize is also cut in half about every 4 years. This is known as a half. This week I saw someone who made me think of all of these things, and I want to give that person a big shout out. His name is Wences Casares. I would say that Wences was the first person who spread Bitcoin in Silicon Valley. He was the one who told me about it in 2010. I remember that he told me the story again. In fact, we were at Oren's Hummus, and he said, he's Greek and Argentinian, I'm going to try to copy his voice. Chamath, you shouldn't buy the Bitcoin. I loved the story after hearing it. I believe I called my family office. I want to buy 1 million of these. He was like, or worth $1 million bucks. He asked, are you crazy? And I said, no, this is just a small starter. The main meal is coming up. Anyway, he has done an amazing job of learning about Bitcoin and spreading the word about it. I want to thank him for bringing this to my attention. But when I saw him a few days ago, he told me that I should really look at how Bitcoin has changed since it was split in half. So I was very interested. So I had Quentin, someone on my team, put this together. Nick, let's go to the first page. What makes this interesting then? Here's a quick look at the Bitcoin price for you. In other words, there have been 2 rounds of halving. I also asked him to look at how the prices changed 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after the haircut. You can see that at first, when Bitcoin is halved, people are kind of rethinking what's going on and trying to figure it out. This is pretty much what I would say happens in the first month and the first 3 months as well. There are, however, crazy price increases that happen between 6 months and 1 year and 18 months after these events. That's what this page shows. 18 months after the first split, the price of Bitcoin went back up 45 times. It came back almost 28x after the second half. After the third half, it returned almost 8 times what it was invested in, which is a huge return in such a short time. Click on the next page. Thus, if you plot that, this is what it starts to show how this price changed after each of these rounds of halving. What's so cool about that? Besides the price halving, which is interesting, if past is any indication, we should also see some price growth. Of course, the other thing that has happened is that Bitcoin is now used for business. We talked about this as my big prediction for 2024. These ETFs will really help Bitcoin cross the chasm and have its center key moment, right? When you use the averages again, these are just averages, you get this. They are not at all guesses. I just want to add a little something to that. This is not advice about money. It's not advice about money. All of these are just guesses. We use these to figure out how much Bitcoin is worth. You can see what might happen if you just average the last few rounds on the next page. Because the first cycle was so harsh, you start to apply oops, I see. Just to be clear, you're doing cycles 2 and 3 here. In this case, only the means of cycles 2 and 3. You start to see some deep respect for what they do. When I asked Wences about this, He said that many countries will never seriously consider Bitcoin, even if they support it. This makes a lot of sense to me. One of those could be the United States. But there are more and more countries that are going to have two currencies. This person will first look at their own cash and then at Bitcoin. They will say that these two things are needed. One, when you're buying and selling items and services every day. A second time is when you need to buy something solid that will have value over time. This is when you'll use something like Bitcoin. I also think that's a very strong idea. And this price chart shows that if this thing starts to appreciate at these rates, it will fully replace gold and become a way to buy and sell hard assets. When you add that to the worry that some people have about the dollar losing value, I think you start to see some really interesting possibilities. I just thought this was Based on Chamath's research, Bitcoin could be worth more than $500,000 per coin by October 2025, which is exactly 18 months after the last hang cycle finished. The chart, on the other hand, shows that prices could go even higher. If the average of cycles 2 and 3 is used, Bitcoin could reach an amazing $1.14 million. It did 45.52x 18 months after the first hang, 27.92x 18 months after the second, and 7.8x 18 months after the third. Chamath and other experts still think that Bitcoin prices will go up a lot more before the cycle ends in 2025, even if it slows down like the 2021 cycle did. Aside from price changes, Chamath is also excited about how Bitcoin prices will change when more companies start to use Bitcoin. But take a look at what went on before. Once upon a time, very big, unified software was replaced by these SaaS providers. Salesforce led the way, and in many ways they defined the cloud. That was really cool. That was one big run. Before that, those big software companies were getting rid of old technologies like mainframes. This is the third stage of change. We are going to get rid of these old goods and replace them with new ones. In other words, Gen.AI is just a layer that makes it possible to give people utility. I believe you will discover that it lets you provide that feature for a lot less money. That is the whole point of 80 to 90, to get to your point. We always make fun of Salesforce by asking, is it going to get 80 to 90? Yes, because it's pretty easy to offer 80% of the benefits at a 90% discount right now. And what you can't do now will be a lot easier in a year, 2 years, 3 years, and for sure in 10 years. The market's money seems to be telling these big, lumpy software companies that they won't be getting any big $50 or $100 million customers anytime soon. That's because those customers will soon realize that they can get what they need for 10 million, 5 million, 1,500,000, or even free, as Freeberg said. Because of this, the way your company handles costs doesn't make sense. So you'll have to go through this very difficult cycle of recycling the business model, which will mean letting go of a lot of people. That won't happen today, but it's likely to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. It doesn't mean Salesforce is a bad business, though. It's just in the wrong part of the process. There is a very good chance that a lot of small businesses will jump at this chance to offer cheaper, smaller, and more flexible services. That's why it dropped 20% in one day. I think that most of the time, these public market buyers hold on to a lot of fears and don't act on them. Whenever they get the chance, they just throw up everything because it's now okay to do that. To answer your question, David, it was such a small loss of income that it really wasn't even worth mentioning. But the 20% drop is because I think people have taken on a different set of risks and then found a way out where they can sell and still have a good reason for doing so. Bloomberg ETF analysts shared new S1 papers on Twitter that show Cathie Woods' company, ARK Invest, has dropped out of the race to make a spot Ether ETF. As of now, ARK's partner 21